Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Aaron Hebner. I have the privilege of bringing the message today. And we're going to be talking about some very familiar passages. Everything today is from the book of Luke, chapter 15. And we're going to look at 3 parables today. But as I make my wife cringe a little bit, I always get these ideas that I want to do up here that they just come to me sometimes. So Jenna, I'm going to steal some of Ivy's thunder. You know what Wednesday is, right? It's going to be May. If you get the joke, you get the joke. Okay? All right. Today we're going to be talking about prodigal love. Does anybody know what prodigal means? Or what we actually think prodigal means, or what we consider it based on what we know? Matt?
Prodigal means you just keep pushing resources out and then you don't really care about money or resources, you just keep spending it.
Okay, so spending. How many of us have heard the story of the prodigal son? We're going to be looking at that today. However, prodigal does have several different meanings, and we're going to look at that today as well. Okay? But before we begin, I do have a small confession to make. Okay? My confession for today is I cannot stand movies with bad endings. I am a sucker for happy endings. Okay? If the bad guy wins, I hate it. If the good guy loses, I hate it. All right? If justice isn't served, I fully hate it. All right? I need to have a resolute ending. And if they don't, and I watch a movie, there's been great movies, even Oscar-winning movies that I've watched that have been totally ruined by the ending because they didn't have a happy ending. Okay? So I do have a couple. The other thing I have to say is about movie endings. Some of my favorite movies are trilogies. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Okay? What always happens at the end of the first movie or the end of the second movie? Do you ever get that resolute ending? No, they have to set it up for the last one. And I hate it. Okay? So, if we have this, movies that I hate the endings to, but I love the movies. The first one, what is it? Which one is that? Empire Strikes Back. Visually, probably the best Star Wars movie. Okay, and I don't consider the last 3 Star Wars movies, by the way. I just have to get that out there. Okay? Great movie, but who looks like they're winning the war? The Empire. Han gets frozen. Luke gets his arm chopped off and finds out Darth Vader's his dad. Okay? The other one. The Fellowship of the Ring. I love Lord of the Rings. It has a lot of history with me becoming the disciple as well. But the ending of the first movie, Pippin and Took get taken by the orcs. The Fellowship breaks up. Boromir dies. And I know it's all a setup, and I know because I've read the books and I've seen all the movies that resolution's coming. But I hate it because I had to wait another year for that next movie to come out. Okay? And then finally, the last one. What is this one right here?
Avengers.
That is Avengers, and that is the end of which of the Avengers movies? Anybody know? Infinity War with the snap, and Thanos eliminates half the galaxy's population. Okay? I know they're going to come back in the end, but at that moment, I hated it. I absolutely love that movie, but I can't stand the ending. Okay? So now that I've had that said, I want to ask a couple questions, or when we get into it, okay? I know that some of us have movies that we leave on a cliffhanger to set up the next movie, but I don't like that non-resolute ending. It drives me nuts. I want justice, okay? We all crave justice, don't we? We want to see the everybody get a fair shake, a world where good prevails over evil. It's our deep-seated human need. We see it in our legal system, in our cheers for the underdog. How many times have you guys rooted against the Patriots when Tom Brady was in the Super Bowl? It's not that we necessarily hate the Patriots, we just want to see somebody else win, right? All right. Unless you're actually a Patriots fan. Okay, see, Nolan? All right. And we love it when the villain finally gets caught, right? But let's be honest, the world often feels unjust. The headlines scream corruption, The innocent suffer, and sometimes it seems like the bad guys even win. That feeling of frustration, or a yearning for the world set right, it can leave us feeling lost, disillusioned, and let's face it, maybe even a little angry at God, right? So, if I said the name, now I don't want to get too graphic here because I know we have some younger members in the audience, but how many of you would know the name Jeffrey Dahmer? He is accused of some of the most horrific crimes against humanity. He was a serial killer and he did horrible things. And he was from Milwaukee. So Milwaukee and Wisconsin get a bad rap because of what he did. Okay? He was killed in prison. It wasn't very long, and some prisoners felt like they were doing the world justice, and they killed him. But I have a question that I want us to start off with. When you die, would you be okay with Jeffrey Dahmer, or someone like him, being in heaven with Jesus forever? Just take a moment and ponder that question. Would you be okay? You die, you've been faithful your whole life, you get up, you come into heaven. Would you be okay with seeing someone like Jeffrey Dahmer in prison? Or Jeffrey Dahmer in heaven with you? Does anybody know the story of Jeffrey Dahmer in prison? Okay, some of you might, but this shocked me. So I have to give credit. I've been reading, if you remember last time I was up here, late last year, I did a sermon on grace. And as part of that, I've been reading several books, and one of them is What's So Amazing About Grace by Philip Yancey. Something I read in that book just absolutely floored me. Jeffrey Dahmer, before he died in prison, actually studied the Bible with the Church of Christ ministers, several of them actually, including one in our fellowship. He studied the Bible, he expressed repentance, and reportedly even got baptized before he was killed in prison. Okay, now, I do want to make a disclaimer. I'm not saying he is in heaven. That's between him and God. What I'm asking is, are you okay with the fact that somebody that did what he did could have repented before he died and could be in heaven with God forever? And that's the question I want to start off with today. You know, as humans, we crave justice, a proportional response to crimes. But God's love is different. It's a love that transcends human understanding. Truth is, none of us is inherently deserving of heaven. We've all sinned and fall short, Romans 3:23. Yet God offers forgiveness, a chance at redemption, through faith in Jesus Christ. Whether that redemption was genuine for Dahmer, only God knows. But it highlights the immense power of God's grace. It's a grace that offers hope even in the darkest places. A grace that extends far beyond our earthly ideas of fairness. That's where today's message comes in, because the truth is, God's love and grace are a radical counterpoint to the world's cry for justice. They are a dazzling display of extravagance that shatters our earthly notions and ideas about fairness and leaves us in awe. So buckle up, because today we're diving deep into the lavish love and grace of God, a love that surpasses justice and transforms our understanding of what it means to be truly loved. So let's go ahead and turn to Luke 15. And we're going to look at three parables today, okay, that all deeply describe God's lavish love for his children and the lengths that he is willing to go to in order to bring them back into the fold. The first one is Luke 15, 1 through 7, and that's the parable of the lost sheep. Okay. Now the tax collectors and sinners, do you notice how tax collectors are always a separate category of just sinners? Some things never change, I guess, right? All right. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Yeah, so a little of the backstory. This is Galilee 2,000 or so years ago. It's busy with activity. Tax collectors and sinners huddle around Jesus, who was, let's be honest, a radical rabbi or teacher whose teachings challenged the status quo. The Pharisees. Anybody ever watched The Chosen yet? Doesn't it seem like he is radical on purpose in that? It's just one of those things that he had to challenge the status quo because that's the only way sometimes things get done. All right, the Pharisees, religious leaders known for their rigidity and scoff. Why would Jesus welcome these outcasts or lost sheep? Jesus addresses the disapproval. He describes a shepherd with a flock of 100 sheep. One day a sheep strays, vulnerable and lost. Despite having 99 safe and sound, the shepherd does the unthinkable. He leaves the flock in the open, exposed to all the elements and all the possible dangers, venturing out to tirelessly search for the one. The world would shake its head at such a choice. Why risk 99 for one? Have any of you guys ever asked that question? Why would you risk 99 for one? In our world, logic dictates that prioritizing the majority. Business focuses on maximizing profits, not individual needs. Social circles often celebrate the popular, leaving the outliers in the fringe. Let's face it, how many likes are those outliers or society would consider weird people on Instagram? How many likes do they get? Versus the people that are, doing the selfies and looking great, they got the hair perfect. That's how our society works. Social circles often celebrate popular, leaving the outliers on the fringe. This approach prioritizes numbers over individuals, efficiency over compassion. However, the shepherd's actions defy worldly logic. His love isn't a limited resource. It overflows. He can't bear the thought of one lost sheep out there alone. He understands the dangers that lurk in the wilderness. Predators, harsh terrain, horrible weather. Okay? The shepherd's choice isn't a rejection of the 99. It's a testament to his boundless love for each and every single sheep. The shepherd's relentless search is rewarded. He finds the lost sheep, relief washing over him. He gently carries it home, celebrating its return with friends and neighbors. Parents, when I think about that, like the sheep over the shoulders, I think of like when my kids were little and, they would, speaking of my kids a little, we always had Nerf gun darts laying around the house. There's a Nerf gun dart laying right on the front, right here on the floor, and I'm just like, yeah, that's my kids when they're little. But when they fall asleep in the car seat or in the car on the way home at night, and how do you get them in the house? Do you wake them up and say, hey, get up, go to bed? What do you do, parents? You pick them up and carry them because that's the most precious thing in the world to you. He carries it gently home, celebrating its return with friends and family. This immense joy confuses the worldly perspective. Shouldn't the shepherd have focused on the 99 the whole time? But here's what I want you to take away from this. The parable offers a deep message. It assures us that God's love, like the shepherd's, is extravagant. We are the sheep and he is the shepherd. Regardless of how far we stray, God's love pursues us. Sorry, forgot that was there. He rejoices immensely out of our return. How many of you have ever, found a quarter on the ground and you're like, woohoo! It means a lot when you're a kid, but, how often do we just leave coins in the dirt, because it's not worth my time to bend over and pick up a penny? Which I think I got ahead of myself because we're doing the coin next. All right. But the point is, God's love pursues us. He rejoices immensely at our return, not because he needs us, because his love overflows for each one of us, each one of his creations. This parable isn't just about forgiveness. It's about how deep and extravagant God's love and his nature is towards us. It's a love that defies logic, a love that relentlessly seeks us out, a love that celebrates our return no matter how lost we are or how lost we feel. It's a love that challenges us to see the world differently, to embrace compassion over convenience, and to extend a similar love to those around us. Okay? Now we're going to move on to the next one, which is that of the lost coin, which should bring us to Luke 15, 8 through 10. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she light a lamp? Or doesn't she light up a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? Or when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me! I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. We're talking about the coin. I was talking with my kids yesterday about this when we were talking about the sermon a little bit. Some of the richest people in the world, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. I saw this crazy stat one time that if Bill Gates, you guys know Microsoft, right? If he actually saw a $20 bill on the floor, and then in the time that he would bend over to pick it up, he would actually make more money than he would just bending down and picking up the $20 bill. So in the span of 2.2 seconds, he's actually earning that from his business pursuits rather than just picking up the 20. I mean, how many of you would rejoice if you found the 20 on the floor and it was yours? I mean, we'd be pretty happy, right? Do we celebrate and say, "Hey, celebrate with me"? Or is it just something, woohoo, a little celebration, and then we go on with life, right? But we have this parable here of the woman with 10 silver coins. Okay? Imagine yourself. Remember, Jesus isn't just saying this. Who's he saying all this stuff to? Who's he speaking to right now? Do you guys remember from the first one? He's actually the tax collectors and other sinners. He's with the Pharisees and a bunch of people in a crowd. Okay, and he's telling these stories. Pharisees, religious leaders known for their strict interpretations of the law, are watching Jesus with suspicion. They're literally trying to find a way to see where he trips up so that they can do something and punish him. They can't understand why he welcomes sinners, the tax collectors, and the outcasts of society. Jesus addresses their disapproval with the story again. He describes a woman with 10 valuable coins. When she loses one, her response is unexpected. She doesn't simply accept the loss. How many of you, you lose a dime, are you going to look for it, or are you just going to give up and move on? Most of us, if you're like me, are just going to move on. But instead, she lights a lamp, sweeps her entire house, searching diligently until the coin is found. Her joy at finding it is immense, and she celebrates with friends and neighbors. So why this parable? Jesus uses this story to illustrate a key point. God's love extends to everyone, not just the righteous or the perfect people. Just like the woman's desperate search for the lost coin, God actively seeks those who have strayed from him. The coin represents a single soul, precious and valued by God. I had to ask this question. I had to do a little research and think about it. You have the parable of the lost sheep, and then you have the parable of the lost son. And then smack dab for 3 verses in the middle, you have the parable of the lost coin. It's placed there for a reason. The lost sheep focuses on God's pursuit of the lost, while the prodigal son dives into forgiveness and acceptance. The lost coin bridges these two themes, emphasizing the immense value God places on each individual. The message is clear. God's love is relentless and all-encompassing. He doesn't see us as a faceless mass, but as unique individuals worthy of his love and attention. Even the seemingly insignificant act of losing a single coin compels a desperate search. This begs the question, how much more does God search for his lost children? So the takeaway for this, the parable is reassurance. Regardless of our past mistakes or how far you feel from God, he hasn't given up on you. He is actively seeking you out, just like the woman searching for the coin. You are valuable in his eyes, and he rejoices at your return, our return. The value that God places on each of us, that was introduced in the first two parables, comes full circle with our last parable today. In the first two, the shepherd and the woman stop what they are doing and immediately go and search for what was lost. Time and effort were given up by the person in the story to make sure that what was lost was found. In the lost coin parable, the owner celebrated when the coin was found. In the lost sheep parable, the shepherd even risked life and limb in the wilderness to go after the lost sheep. Finding each of these lost items in the first two parables were costly. But the prodigal son parable is much more costly, and I think even more relatable in today's culture. In this one, we're talking about money and reputation. Let's read the scripture in Luke 15, starting in verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything." Anybody ever raised pigs in here? Mark, I know, and I have too. Pigs aren't known for their diet. I mean, there's a reason we call someone a pig, right? It's because they eat anything and everything. And historically, they would get what they call slop. A lot of it is just the leftovers, whether you're on a dairy farm with the leftover, solids from the milk or anything from the table, they would eat it. This person, not only would you denigrate yourself in Jewish society with the pigs, but think about that. He was so hungry, he wanted to eat what pigs eat. Let that sink in for a minute. And when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death." Doesn't that say something about his father too? That the servants had food to spare. He didn't just pay his servants, he actually took care of them. Do you guys get that same thing from that? When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate.'" Did you notice that that's the theme in all 3 stories? It wasn't just about finding it. The person celebrated. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near his house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has seen him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and have never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours," remember, he didn't say his brother, it's your son. Kind of like when the kids are doing something wrong and, "Hey, go deal with your son." You know, not my son, this one's yours, right, Amy? All right. He has squandered your property with prostitutes and comes home. You killed a fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you were always with me, and everything I have is yours. So, sometimes in some translations they say the prodigal son. Prodigal has two meanings. One means that you can spend excessively, just blow your money. The flip side of that is, it can also mean to give extravagantly or lavishly. So there are both sides of the prodigal here. You have the prodigal son who did blow everything that he was given. But you also have the father who is also prodigal in his love, that lavishly gives everything. And he's embodied by this by the father in the story, to how he reacts to his son leaving and returning. Remember both sides of the definition as we break down the passage. In Jewish culture, the inheritance typically went to who? The oldest. We're talking about the youngest son here. And it was only upon the father's death. So for the younger son to demand his share while his father was still alive was a blatant sign of disrespect and disregard for that tradition. It was basically saying, I wish you were dead and I want my money now. Money that he probably wasn't even entitled to begin with as the younger son. So not only did he want money that wasn't his, he basically wanted his dad dead because he wanted the money instead. I can't imagine how the father would feel about this request and what it meant. I know as a dad, if my kids ever requested this of me, at least my initial reaction, I would feel horribly disrespected and hurt. That in my anger, I would throw my kid out of the house and not want to ever speak to him again because it become about me. Not only from the feeling of my kids wishing me dead, but the sense of entitlement that those kids had. And it would become all about me and how I failed as a parent, and be offended that my kids would even think to make that request. Now contrast my initial reaction with what the father does. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't even try to persuade him or to fight with him. He simply agrees to it and gives it to him. Who would do something like that? To me, that just seems dumb. You know the kid's going to blow it, and I'm going to look like the fool in the process. But the father's love, the reaction by the father is truly countercultural, and that's part of the story. The story is about who God is, and how he is not only different than us, but better than us. The father, instead of being enraged, acts with unbelievable compassion. He divides the inheritance and lets his son go. That was unheard of. Fathers had immense authority in Jewish culture, and such defiance was actually commanded to be what? Stoned to death. The father and the family would also face shame and humiliation to their reputation and family name because of the son's actions. But the father's love surpasses societal norms. He doesn't chase after the son to force him back, but he waits patiently. When the son finally hits rock bottom and he realizes his mess up, the father doesn't berate him or even give him an I told you so. Oh man, I love those I told you so's, to be honest. At least when I can give them out instead of being the one that receives them, right? Let's face it, who likes an I told you so? Let's be honest here, right? All right, I know my kids are getting the brunt of this, and they're kind of like going down in their seats a little bit. Sorry, guys. All right. But he divides the inheritance and lets him go. That was unheard of. Okay? He runs to meet him, and he welcomes him back with open arms, even throwing a feast in his honor. I'm going to tell you, Jewish men in the first century did not run. If they ran, that would actually require them, because they wore those long flowing robes, he would actually have to hitch it up, think of like a ballroom dress or a wedding dress. He would have to run like this. But does anybody know what that would actually do in the process? that would actually force him to show his bare legs. And Jewish men did not show bare legs. That would actually be a sign of humiliation and shame for a Jewish man, especially a rich man like this, to bare his legs in public. Further proof that the father in the story scorned all shame and humility to his reputation in order to be reunited with his son. Now, for the other side of the story, the one that kind of hits home for me even more than the dad, we're talking about the elder son now. This joyous celebration is met with resentment from the older son, who had stayed faithful and worked hard. He embodies the feeling of needing justice. He disobeyed you, wasted everything, and now he gets a party just for coming back. This, to me, and my sense of justice and fairness, fits me like a T. In my nature, I am a person that demands just punishment and fairness for each individual, good or bad. One of the things I've said to my kids since they were very little, good choices generally get good consequences. Bad choices generally get bad consequences. And I believe in receiving what you have put into something. Is that what happened in this story? Not at all. Not at all. So this is where I really struggle, to be honest, guys. I'm being really honest here. This stuff hit me like a brick house. Because I want justice in everything. That's why I started with that movie thing. Because I believe you should get out of something what you put into it. But God's love flips that upside down. It's not about what we have done. It's about who He is. And I struggle with this about the lost son, and to take on the heart of God in this passage. I want to have the younger son get what he has coming to him, and for the loyal and serving son to get the reward for his loyalty and hard work. Conversely, this is where the true message of the parable shines through and contrasts with my own sinful nature. God's love isn't based on merit or keeping score. It's extravagant and unconditional. He rejoices at the return of the lost sheep, regardless of how far they've strayed. The father's love for the younger son doesn't diminish his love for the older son either. He invites him to the celebration, reminding him that love isn't about getting what you deserve, but about the joy of the restored relationship. And the relationship is the key part to all of this. God wants that restored relationship with all of us. That is why He has done everything, including His own Son to the cross, to die and to resurrect, to restore our relationship. Because remember, no matter how justified we feel, Romans 3:23 tells us that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified freely by His grace, His lavish love, through the redemption that came only by Jesus Christ. We are all the lost son, and we have all strayed and squandered our inheritance that we were designed for as image bearers of God. That goes back to Genesis. We were made in the image of God. Sin ruined that, and Jesus had to restore it. So I hope that these parables speak to all of us. We have all strayed from God's path at some point, yet His love remains constant, a beacon in the darkness, waiting to welcome us back with open arms. It challenges us to move beyond the need for earthly justice and embrace the extravagant love of God, a love that offers forgiveness, restoration, and a place at His table, no matter what our past is. So finally, to close out, let's circle back to our original question. How would you really feel if you saw somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer sitting next to Jesus at the table that has been prepared for him in heaven for his saints? Now, please remember, I'm not saying that this person is. What I'm merely asking is, how would you feel about that? And how we answer that question tells us a lot about how much we actually understand God's love for each and every one of us. Thank you.